Very much. You're a lucky. When it comes in a big bid.
Hi, folks. Excuse me. Hi, folks. I want to welcome you all to the second LFA local flood analysis meeting for Phoenicia. If you don't know me, I'm Rob Stanley. I'm the town supervisor. I want to thank you for coming tonight. Again, your input is crucial to this step. We started last fall with an initial meeting with everybody who could attend at the time, and maps were laid out, markings were made, ideas were given, all kinds of things, bridges, dredging, everything under the sun that was provided by the community, as well as other ideas from other communities in the Catskills that have found to be promising. So what I'd like to say is keep in mind that this is an open process, that we are still continuing to work. This is not the final end-all be-all of all projects. Tonight, Mark Carabetta from Malone & McBroom, the town's engineering firm, is going to present to you their findings through a very detailed analysis, not only of the stream, but also of cost benefits, to see what it's going to cost to do certain activities, how beneficial it will be for us in the long run in order for our community to be more resilient. Again, I'll point out that flooding, there is no magic bullet. There is nothing we can do to stop flooding. Flooding will happen. What we can do is we can try to minimize that risk, and we can try to reduce our own personal risks at our houses, our homes, for our families. So with that, again, I'll turn it over to Mark Carabetta.
Thank you, Rob. I'll echo a few things that Rob said. I want to just thank you for coming. I recognize a few faces from last time, and I see some new ones as well, which is great. As Rob said, I'm just going to go over quite a bit of material. I'm going to try and give an overview of everything we covered, but it's a lot of material, so don't hesitate. We'll have some time at the end to ask questions. And as Rob also said, there's no magic solution here. We're going to present some ideas that will help to reduce flooding. It's not going to eliminate it entirely in a big storm. Someone asked me what CFM stood for, that's Certified Floodplain Manager, and I'm not the only one in the room. I know Eric and Rob and Aaron and a few others who I'm probably missing are Certified Floodplain Managers as well. With that, let me just jump in here and get started. I'm sorry if I'm going to step in front of people just to advance the slides. So tonight I'm just going to go just an overview of what this LFA process is all about that we talked about at the last meeting. I'm going to explain some of the flood mitigation options that we considered for Phoenicia and show you some of the hydraulic modeling results to see what sort of floodwater reduction we get under these various scenarios. For the flood reduction scenarios that seemed to work pretty well, that had some merit, we put it through a benefit cost analysis. So it's basically looking at what sort of benefits you get from reducing the floodwater in terms of reduction in flood damage, and comparing that with the cost of actually implementing the project. And if it's a positive benefit cost analysis, then it indicates that it's probably a pretty good project and you could pursue funding opportunities. And then at the end, we'll talk about what the next steps are, because as Rob said, this isn't quite a finished product. We started by presenting this introduction to the town board, and that was back last September. Then we had two parallel meetings such as this one. We had one back in October, last fall in Phoenicia. We laid out maps, gathered a lot of your ideas about flood damages, observations during the flood, some ideas of what you thought might be helpful for reducing flooding. And we took some of that information and we modeled it. We did a sort of a parallel process in Mount Tremper, the following. And then here we are back now. We're here today in Phoenicia presenting some preliminary results and getting some feedback. And we'll do the same thing in a week in Mount Tremper. And then at a date yet to be determined, but soon, we'll take this back to the town board and present it to them. So I said I'd go back over quickly what is a local flood analysis. It's basically a science-based engineering analysis. We develop a number of flood mitigation alternatives working with you, and we evaluate how effective they are using hydraulic modeling. We use a hydraulic modeling tool, engineering software called HEC-RAS, which was developed by the Army Corps of Engineers. We develop preliminary cost estimates for some of these alternatives. And as I explained, we do a benefit cost analysis. We don't want to put a lot of resources into something that's not going to be cost effective and is not going to ultimately result in reduction in flooding. As we go forward from here, we'll be helping to identify funding sources for those alternatives that have a positive benefit cost ratio. And really the town should think of it as, on the one hand, an action plan for immediate action. We hope to present you with some ideas where the town could take immediate action. But some of them won't be immediately actionable. Some will maybe be enacted a little further down the road when funding becomes available or when a bridge is scheduled to be replaced. And what we should be left with at the end is just a better understanding of what's feasible in terms of flood mitigation here in Phoenicia. So there's two separate project areas. They come up right against each other. Phoenicia, and you see the lines here on the map. I have the upstream and downstream limits on Esopus Creek, and then where Stony Clove comes in. So this whole area is the project area that we were evaluating. You see the mileage on the screen there. This is the same area, just on an aerial photograph, and the project boundaries. And as I said, we're doing the same thing down in Mount Tremper, and if you're interested, come next Monday night to hear more about that. Now, as we went through this project, after our initial kickoff meeting here, we met about half a dozen times with the Safari group, and that Safari stands for the Shandaken Area Flood Assessment and Remediation Initiatives. You have trouble saying it. And you'll see the groups there that were involved, and it includes residents and business owners, a number of organizations that fall under the umbrella of the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program, Ulster County Department of Environment, and our firm, Mylone and McBrone. So we met a number of times. We looked at some of the alternatives. We kind of hammered things out, threw some out, added some new ones, looked at the results of the hydraulic modeling and the benefit cost analysis. Now, for most of the project area, we used what's called one-dimensional modeling. The confluence of Stony Clove and Esopus Creek is a little bit tricky because you have the two streams coming together, and right where the cross sections for those two streams meet, you have Phoenicia and Main Street. So we use what's called two-dimensional modeling, which gives you a little better understanding of the flooding. And I just want to show you one kind of existing conditions modeling run that we use, just so you can sort of see how it works. You see there's sort of a helicopter photo here immediately post Irene that we used for some of our calibration. You can see some of our modeling there sort of marked up with a pen that we used for calibration. And if you'll bear with me for 1 minute, I'm just going to put one of the models up so you can see how it works. Everybody recognize where this is. This is Esopus Creek. Stony Clove coming down. And basically I'm going to run a little movie. The different colors of blue on there represent flooding depth. And as this runs across the top, you're going to see Irene inundate the hamlet, and then the water is going to recede. You're going to see the depth. And this is just to give you an idea of how this modeling looks. You'll see the time sort of scrolling. This is August 27th right here at about 11 p.m. Not about 11 p.m., it's exactly 11 p.m. I'm just going to let that run there and watch the time and then watch what happens with the water. And then you see it recede. And I'm just going to show you one more that deals with flow velocities. So this was depth of flow. As I said, the darker blue represents the deeper water, the lighter blue the shallower water. At the same time, we're able to run velocity. And I'm going to run the same thing here. And the blue represents slow-moving water, and the red represents quickly moving water. And this is that same time period. It takes a little while to get started. This is 3 in the morning now on the 28th. You see the red is the high velocity and the yellow. You can see how it starts coming down Main Street here at a higher velocity than in the areas where all the buildings are, which makes sense. So I know it's invoking probably some bad memories here, but I wanted to show you what the model we use. This is an existing condition. So now as we experiment with different flood mitigation alternatives, we can compare it to this and see what sort of reduction in flooding we get.
How accurate is it?
Well, it's based on light. No, I know it's just a complicated answer. It's based on the LiDAR mapping. So it's about a meter or so accuracy in terms of the elevation. There's surveyed cross sections in the stream that were done post Irene that kind of give you the size of the channel, and then the water that we're flowing through it is based on actual stream flow data. There's not really a number I can tell you in terms of its accuracy, but it's based on all that information. But it's a model. Like any model, it's not 100% accurate. It's our best model, and we start by recreating existing conditions, and then we work off of that.
And the pink and darker red brush colors are...
That's the FEMA mapped 100-year floodplain. They just put that on there as a background, as a reference.
Which is lighter, which is darker, that's the trees.
Oh. This red line that sort of follows like this,
Yeah.
that's the FEMA 100-year floodplain. The other colors are just colors of the aerial imagery in the background.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the alternatives I'll show are based on the peak of that flood event and comparing it to different alternatives. Now I'm just going to go close that down and go back to my presentation. So here are the alternatives that we evaluated, both on Esopus Creek and on Stony Clove Creek. And I'll go through these one at a time. We looked at each bridge, at least each bridge that appeared to be creating a hydraulic constriction, or having water back up behind it, almost like it was acting like a dam during a big flood event. We looked at all the bridges with the exception of the Route 28 bridge, because the water didn't come anywhere close to it. It passed underneath it. So we looked at Woodland Valley Bridge. We looked at the Bridge Street Bridge. And with this modeling, basically, you could take the bridge out of the model and see what happens. Do we get a big reduction in flooding? And if we do, then we can model in a larger bridge and hopefully see a benefit to some of the homes and structures upstream of the bridge that maybe are getting flooded as a result of this undersized bridge. We could change the deck size on the bridge. We could change the geometry of the bridge to see if there's any benefit there. We also looked at floodplain enhancement down Esopus and down Stony Clove, and I'll show some illustrations as we move along that explains that in a little more detail. We looked at the removal of accumulated sediment, so where you see these cobble bars here and there in the channel. We canoed the channel and noted a lot of where these occurred. We looked at aerial images, and basically it's basically skimming off the gravel bars. We wanted to see how helpful that would be in terms of flood reduction. And then we did a dredging of the channel scenario, basically right through the area under the Route 28 bridge, the confluence, Bridge Street, to see what sort of benefit that had. And then on Stony Clove, we looked at a number of modifications to the Main Street Bridge and floodplain enhancement, which I said I'll explain in a little more detail. Now I'm just going to start upstream and work my way downstream. So this is the Woodland Valley Bridge. It's a little hard to see because of the similar colors, but the creek's flowing this way, from left to right. And you can see there's a bit of a bubble upstream of the bridge. You see this, water's flooding over Woodland Valley Road here. It appeared that may be caused by the fact that this bridge is causing a constriction. And we looked at that in the model. And this is a longitudinal profile, so that the creek is flowing this way. We're looking at the creek from the side. This is the bed of the creek. And these lines represent water surface elevations. And they're paired. So the blue lines represent the 10-year flood, with and without the bridge. And the red line, the 100-year flood. And the green line is the 500-year flood. And we look at what sort of reduction we get by taking the bridge out of the model, which really represents putting in a larger structure that would pass the flood. So in the 100-year flood, you see the difference between the two red lines here. This is the water surface elevation with the bridge in place, and the lower one is without the bridge in place. We see about a 4.8 foot reduction during the 100-year flood, immediately upstream of the Woodland Valley Bridge. And that sort of declines. You see the wedge, and it goes about 750 feet upstream. So we do see a reduction in flooding there if the bridge were to be upsized. But if you looked at the map, that area of inundation upstream of the bridge is not causing any homes or structures to be flooded. It is causing, it appears, Woodland Valley Road to flood. So without the flooding of any structures, as I say here, replacement of with a larger bridge would reduce water surface elevations there and reduce flooding of Woodland Valley Road. It wouldn't reduce flooding of any homes. It's not the smoking gun we're looking for here. We didn't recommend further analysis of the bridge. However, when it comes time for this bridge to be replaced, or if the bridge is damaged, our report will state that we recommend a larger structure in that location because it doesn't have the capacity to pass the larger floods. Now this is the Bridge Street Bridge, which we know is in poor condition. It's prone to debris jams. We modeled it with some debris jams in place and without debris jams. We know it's been damaged in Irene and in other floods. It overtopped. However, we learned from Safari, from Rob, and some others that the bridge is important in terms of commerce and traffic flow through town. We don't want the town to have just one bridge or not a direct way for people to drive through town. So we know that it's important to have that bridge there. So our analysis involved not just removal of the bridge, but looking at options for a larger bridge. And we did an analysis similar to what I showed you at Woodland Valley. I'm not going to show you those hydrographs for every one because it gets a little tedious after a while, but we'll have them all in our report. We found that by taking that bridge out of the model, the benefit was very localized. We saw about a 3-foot reduction in water surface elevations immediately upstream of the bridge. But because this channel is fairly steep, it diminishes fairly quickly as you go upstream. And when you look at the benefits in terms of flooding on Main Street, not very much from replacing that bridge or putting it up higher. However, the bridge was playing an important role because when we started to look at it in combination with some of our floodplain enhancement scenarios, we found that the bridge was playing a pretty important role, and I'll explain that more as I go along. Now, I've been mentioning floodplain enhancement, and here's what I mean by floodplain enhancement. This is just sort of a cross-section of a typical channel. And I know it's a little hard to read, but just picture this. Picture Phoenicia being over here. We have an area of floodplain on both sides of the river, and then we have the channel, the active channel itself, the part that's wet all the time, not just during floods. And what we modeled here is basically excavating out areas of the floodplain along both sides of the creek to lower it. The active channel would stay the same. It might be resized a bit to make sure that it could convey sediments, but under normal flows, the water is here in the channel. It's only during the floods where the water is up here on the floodplain. You lower this area on both sides of the channel, and it can be used during non-flood conditions, which is most of the time, for recreation, for trails, for biking, for that sort of thing. But you can't inhabit it during a flood. It gets inundated, but by letting these areas be inundated, you reduce the flooding outside of that floodplain area, which includes the Main Street area. And the nice thing here is by sizing the channel properly, you're not creating a bathtub where sediment comes in, every storm, every big storm, it dumps there and needs to be redredged. You can create a properly sized channel that will convey sediments. And this is an approach that's worked in other places. So we wanted to model that. And we tried a few different scenarios. Now, I meant to say this as part of my introduction, but some of these scenarios I'm going to show you are going to impact properties directly. Some of these floodplain enhancement scenarios are going to involve removing buildings in order to make way for that floodplain to be created. Nothing I'm presenting here is going to be forced upon this community. This is all being presented for your consideration, and the landowners who are impacted by it would have to agree to it in order for it to go forward. So I want to be clear about that. So we modeled one scenario with this floodplain enhancement, which is, as I explained, is excavating of the floodplain down the left bank of Stony Cove, around the corner, and all the way down almost to Elmer's Bend. And we modeled that. It's a lot of excavation and displacement of some structures. And I'll provide more detail on that as we go along. We also looked, because we thought it was acting as a bit of a pinch, excavation of a floodplain right in that area. And then as the third piece, and this shows all three of them, we modeled it up through here. In this scenario, when all three are combined, similar to what I showed you in that sort of artist renditioning there, it's floodplain excavation on both sides of the channel. Now, I mentioned earlier the Bridge Street Bridge. You couldn't build this with the Bridge Street Bridge as it is. Then the Bridge Street Bridge would become sort of like the weak link in the chain or the bottleneck. In order to do this, you'd have to rebuild the Bridge Street Bridge, and it would have to go all the way back to this intersection here, span the whole floodplain, and tie in back over here somewhere. And you see, as you approach the Bridge Street Bridge, I'm sure you've all done it, you sort of dip down, and then you come up over the bridge, and you dip down again. It would basically span that whole area, span the whole floodplain. So this is kind of one idea that we modeled quite thoroughly. And now I'm not going to run the whole movie, but this shows during the 10-year flood, this is existing conditions. So, and I think everybody understands what I mean by a 10-year flood. This is a flood that, in any given year, has a 1 in 10 chance of occurring, statistically. It doesn't mean that when you have one, you're not going to get another one in 10 years. It just means you have a 1 in 10 chance. So these are the types of flows that we run through these models. So in the 10-year flood, I can toggle these back and forth And the change in color is a little subtle. So we put some numbers on here so you can see. So that's existing conditions. And that's with this those floodplain enhancements put in place. And this shows the sort of water surface reduction we see in this area of the village. And it ranges because this is fairly complicated modeling. You've got little areas with different depths. But the flood reduction ranged from about 1/10 of a foot up to about a foot reduction. Down in this area, downstream of Bridge Street, we saw about a 1.4 foot reduction. Over on this side, flood reduction in that range, 2.2 to 3.5 feet. And you see the rest of the numbers there. So in a 10-year flood, we're seeing some reduction. I mean, a foot reduction in some areas of Main Street is a fair bit. It doesn't get water off Main Street, but it reduces it. Now this is the Irene flood that I showed you earlier. This is just the peak, rather than running through the whole model. And I'm going to do the same thing here. This is existing conditions, proposed conditions. Now I wish we could see less blue on there under the proposed conditions, but we do see reductions in flooding throughout the area. So in terms of that floodplain enhancement, it reduces but does not eliminate flooding in many areas of Phoenicia, including on Main Street. We see a reduction of up to 1.2 feet on Main Street during the Irene magnitude flood that we ran. It would require the relocation of some homes and businesses in order to construct this floodplain enhancement to make way for it. And it would require a larger Bridge Street bridge. So we decided that this alternative had some merit to it, and we were going to put it through the cost-benefit analysis to see what the value is of the reduction in flooding versus the cost of building it. So put that one aside for now. I'll come back to the results of the benefit cost analysis, but I want to show you some of the other alternatives first. So this was the one I spoke of about removing some of these accumulated sediment bars. It's not really full-blown dredging. It's just going in where those gravel bars are accumulated. I'm sure you're familiar with them, and removing them. We're able to do that in the modeling. I know this photo's a little dark, but these are some examples of what, these accumulated cobble bars, these lateral cobble bars, all through here, including this one. And this is down near Sleepy Hollow. There's more in the channel. We're able to go into the cross sections of the model and sort of remove those and see what sort of benefit it has on flooding. Now, we ran a number of different flows. There's probably a lot of numbers to look at, but I'll kind of walk you through it. These are different locations, different cross sections in our modeling, from upstream to downstream. So this is near the confluence, near the Route 28 bridge and the confluence with Stony Clove. This is as we go onto Bridge Street, and then this is down near Sleepy Hollow Campground. And all these cross sections, we sort of shaved off those sediment bars. What we see is what's called the bankful flow, which is basically a flow that happens, a flood that comes every year and a half, maybe every 2 years. We see some benefit during those flood events, small flood events. But once you go up to the 10-year flood event, these are the sort of reductions we're seeing. And they're very small. Some of them are negative. And when you get up into the bigger flood events, the result is very localized and negligible, and it tends to be most apparent during the bankful events. And in those cases, homes aren't really being flooded anyways during the bankful events. It's the bigger floods and the bankful. So here's our conclusions about removing accumulated sediment bars. As I said, very moderate reductions during some of the bankful events, negligible during bigger floods, and there's a significant cost in accessing the channel, removing sediments. So what we wanted to do is try a different scenario here where we're actually going deeper and digging down about 3 feet. And we call this the dredge scenario, and I will show you the results of that analysis. So just to orient you, there's a Socus Creek and the Stony Clove coming in. Route 28 and Bridge Street. Basically, between these two red lines, we lowered the elevation of the channel by 3 feet. And that was suggested during our initial meetings. I could have gone down further, but I wanted to run this particular area because that's where most of the flood-prone properties is. That's where you're going to get most of the benefit if you see a reduction in flooding, and we wanted to see how that worked out.